I offer this podcast freely. Your support really makes a difference. To make a donation, visit reneemckenna.com. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about care for the soul. And I have come to see humans as three-parted. There's the spiritual aspect of ourself, which is connected to the larger consciousness system, or the god or goddess of our own misunderstanding. There's the personality part of the self that includes our life circumstance, our personality, our body, and the ancestry, race, culture, and life situation that we find ourselves in our regular waking everyday life. And then there is the soul self, which I see as the intermediary or meeting place between spirit and our personality or ego self. And those three parts, spirit, soul, and ego, operate as a system. They're indivisible from each other. One of the big problems of scientific materialism is the lack of wisdom that can happen when we break things into their individual parts or compartmentalize them. We can lose the perspective that nothing operates outside of a larger system. As the wise Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh says, everything is in a state of interbeing. We inter-are with everything else that's happening in life. And although the scientific worldview has given us tremendous gifts and advantages in modern life, in healthcare and technology, really unimaginable benefits on so many levels in the material world, but it's very easy to compartmentalize or see things and ourselves as a series of parts rather than from the larger whole. And this is part of the duality of life on the earth plane, to include both our intellect and our intuition. I like to talk about that from the masculine and feminine perspective, not as men and women or genital orientation, but from the perspective of the archetypes of masculine and feminine that we all have within us. The masculine being the more scientific, rational worldview, and the feminine being this more meta wisdom perspective. And we need both. There's tremendous benefit in understanding the parts. It's one of the ways that we can really look deeply to understand what's happening and to be able to make positive, constructive changes in the food we eat, in the relationships we have, in the way that we move through the world, and how we interact with the material world for our own benefit and the benefit of others. Again, tremendous advances in construction, in transportation, in technology, in how we feed ourselves. But without the larger wisdom perspective that we are part of a system, many systems actually. We're part of the ecosystem of the earth, both locally and globally and universally. We're part of a system socially and interpersonally, from our circle of friends, our family, our community, our area, our country, and the world. From a consciousness perspective, we have our own limited conceptual understanding, our own level of consciousness, the information we take in, and the information we put out. And we do have some choice about what we take in and put out on a consciousness level, depending on the media we consume, the quality of the conversations that we have. But that's greatly impacted by the consciousness of the larger systems that we move in. Again, our culture, our religion, our family, our country, and humanity as a whole. And to bring it to the meta perspective, the universal consciousness of which we are all a part. That's why I say the god or goddess of our own misunderstanding, because with our own limited human tools of perception, there's no way we can grok universal consciousness in any accurate or comprehensive way. Even the enlightened ones, I think, are limited in their capacity to perceive the larger system. Of course, I could be wrong about that because of my own limitations. In my own personal search for expanding this integration of the human experience on all these different levels. So I go off on all that because we can't talk about the soul separate from the personality or the larger consciousness system. Just as we can talk about our heart or our circulatory system on a physical level, but it's inseparable from our nervous system and from our pulmonary system of breathing. It moves the oxygen in and out, and even our digestion, which helps to move the waste that the circulatory system is continually collecting and moving, and the nourishment of oxygen and minerals and all of the needs of our different cells. The whole thing works together. And we could look at our heart from a chakra or energy perspective and how open or closed it is in our relationality with others, with ourself, and again with God. But we can't just look at our heart center and our relationality separate from all of the other energetic systems. The heart, the mind, and the gut all work together and inform each other and make us the unique individual that each one of us is. I watched this really interesting presentation of the Genome Project, and they brought out the genetic coding of one person, and it covered the whole stage in printouts. An individual human genome is over 3 billion pairs. Infinitely complex and variable puzzle of being a human. The infinitely complex and non-repeating puzzle of each aspect of creation. Not just each human, but each tree, each animal, each rock. The unfathomable, emergent, creative process that's ever unfolding from the universe. And that is spirit. And from my perspective, this dual perspective of spirit, there exists both a place of unchangeable peace and presence, the infinite now, the perpetual Om of the ground of being, which ancient masters like the Buddha pointed to and modern masters like Eckhart Tolle bring to us through the power of now. And I'm going on a 10-day meditation retreat in a few weeks in Mexico with my new teacher, Igor Kufayev, and the perspective of Kashmir Shaivism, which I'm very excited to learn about. And one of the things I like about Igor is he talks about this duality of spirit and the masculine and feminine interplay. And the feminine aspect of spirit is Shakti, is that emergent creative force, the womb of potential that is both a place of peace and a place of pure and powerful, emergent creative potential. Another one of my favorite spiritual teachers, David Hawkins, talks about that the universal process is one event. And we are a part of that event, and it's perpetually unfolding in new, expanding, evolving, creative ways. That any ideas that we are stuck are a misperception. Everything is in motion, creating, dissolving, reforming itself, unifying, polarizing, reflecting, reforming, unifying, polarizing, reflecting, and reforming again. Always in new and different ways. Expanding and evolving in complexity. And that's a model for us in our lives, to surrender to this expanding, evolving pull of the life force. And we're a part of that. We don't have to control it. We can't control it. We don't even have to understand it, but we can trust that we are a part of something larger, just like each cell in our body benefits from the larger physical structure, all those different systems of digestion and circulation and inflow and outflow. But the skin cell in my pinky finger does not have to understand that we're going to the coffee shop to get an extra large matcha latte. It just has to be a skin cell. And so we, on a personality level, don't have to understand the larger universal structures, nor can we, but we can trust them and align ourselves with the larger system. And our individual health or dysfunction, just like the health or dysfunction of our cells, does affect the whole and certainly our own individual experience. And that's really what my spiritual psychology work is about, both with individual clients and in my mentorship program. That's what all good personal growth work is about recognizing, dissolving, releasing dysfunction or patterned defensive structures and optimizing the way that we power ourselves through the world so that we can align ourselves in a productive flow with this larger system, with the singular unfolding event of the cosmos that we're a part of, and aligning ourselves with our own soul's purpose within that. And so we have spirit, God, universal mind, life force, the larger consciousness system, and we have our individual personality self, the container that we get, the kind of cell that we are in this lifetime. And for me, the soul is the interface between those two. Personality self often suffers greatly from a feeling of disconnection from that larger system. That physical reality and the way that we experience it can be very confusing, produces tremendous fear. Why are we separate? Why do things happen? Why is there suffering and death and impermanence? And most great spiritual and religious traditions attempt to answer those questions. In fact, I believe that wrestling with this experience of separation, of duality, of our personality self from the larger system, is the fuel for the evolutionary machine on this plane of existence. And the suffering or the misunderstanding or the drive to reunify, to find peace, fulfillment, joy, is central to the human experience. We can see it in the very first stories in the Bible. Adam and Eve expelled from the Garden of Eden as an attempt to explain our essential experience of feeling separate from God. And again, this kind of universal experience of if we're separate, we must be unworthy. And the original sin in that, and using the word sin in its original meaning, which is an archery term, which means missing the mark, where we miss the mark, the original sin is actually that we blame ourselves for that, that somehow we are unworthy or have done something to be separate from God. And I have been greatly informed by Hindu cosmology, the one divided into two so that it could have an experience of itself, Shiva and Shakti, the masculine and feminine, and that their dance is the cosmic dance of universal flow, and that all creation is birthed from their dance. We are all children of the god and goddess. But in order to have a real experience and for new things to happen, the parts had to forget that they were whole. And spirit is that whole, and our soul self is how we remember. Our soul is our individuated unit of consciousness from this larger consciousness system that incarnates into this particular body and life circumstance to have an experience of itself. And from this perspective, there is no good or bad or right or wrong. Everything is just an experience. And in this larger cycle of unity and then separation and then reunification, that the soul cycle is to separate and reunify, and to separate and reunify. And birth and death and that space in between could be seen as part of that process. Many say that dreamless sleep is our souls returning each night into that larger system to be restored, reminded, rejuvenated. But we don't remember. And because the one is in the joy of perpetual creativity, true emergent creativity of things that have never existed before, the 3 billion unique genomic pairs that give each individual person such a unique and not replicable experience. Our personality self is how the soul connects that experience with the larger system. And the soul doesn't actually give a shit about the personality self. And a lot of times vice versa, that our personality really resists the soul, which is why all three parts, spirit, ego, or personality, and the soul self are so important to have in our conscious awareness. And so how do we care for our soul? And for me, that practice is about recognizing that there is an aspect of divinity within myself and within everyone else. That there's a wisdom, feedback, conversation on a deeper level that's available through my feelings, through my body, through my daily experience, my intuition, and that my ego or personality self is often very connected with my intellect? And can I open to the more body-centered, feminine, intuitive ways of knowing through prayer, meditation, taking in nourishing information, speaking with kindness, acting with love and generosity, to care for my own soul and to care for the soul of others, regardless of how I feel about their personality self, to know that I am a tiny cell of God participating in this larger body that the universal mind is experiencing through me. And what is that deeper experience that wants to happen? Can I trust this unfolding dance? And how do I participate with it rather than being afraid of it, feeling unworthy, unlovable, or that I might be harmed? The personality agenda is influenced, again, by our life circumstance. And the soul is influenced by the larger consciousness system. And how can we bring them into alignment? Being in nature and really deeply seeing these cyclical processes of which we're a part. Birth, death, rebirth. Every day with the sun, with the seasons, with plants and creatures. We're not separate from that. And so for me, care for the soul is to make room for the soul. As much room for the soul as I have for my ego and personality self, and as much room as I have for my larger spiritual practice. And how do I align all three? That's a question for each of us that has a unique answer. Some people align with their soul through surfing or gardening, caring for children, making love with someone that they care about. Some through contemplation, journaling, making art, following our own joy. So for me, the first way that we care for the soul is to recognize that we have or are one, and to honor this possibility that we are an aspect of God, encased in an individual human ego or personality circumstance, and that all of that works together to form our experience. And as we experiment or grow in different ways to be able to listen to and be guided and informed by our soul self, how does that change or evolve our personality self? And I personally believe that our individual evolution and expansion feeds back into the evolution and expansion of the life force itself. I believe that God itself is evolving and expanding, and that our individual experience is part of the life force itself flowing and growing and expanding. And not just humans, but every aspect of physical reality is an element of consciousness. Everything is infused with the life force, even inanimate and man-made things. I've moved to Manhattan, and the life force here is so strong. The flow of 12 million people, the buildings and the streets and the subway, that everything is infused with life. And that our soul work is to align ourselves with it, to align ourselves with spirit, the larger flow of this life force. And the self that needs to be aligned is our personality self, how we spend our time, the choices we make, the way we use our energy for the benefit of ourselves and others. And the soul calls us to dissolve our fears and misunderstandings of disconnection, and to trust that we are safe, even in our impermanence, and to align our individual free will with this larger universal will as best we can. And I'm not going to tell you that that is not ridiculously hard sometimes, but care for the soul always calls us to grow and moves us forward in constructive, productive ways for us and those around us. The soul is interested in long-term good over short-term comfort. And this massive change I just made, this move from San Francisco to Manhattan, is totally soul-directed. I'm here because it feels like the right thing to do, even though my intellect, my personality self doesn't totally understand, and I felt overwhelmed and frightened at times. I feel grateful that I've been taught and come to a place of trusting my soul more than my ego. And the litmus test is to see how things work out. If I'm banging my head against the wall trying to make something happen and it's not, that's information. And when the doors seem to open easily and everything's a green light, that's the larger system affirming that I'm on the right path. And so I encourage you to care for your soul, to recognize that you are a soul as much as you are a personality, that you are an individuated unit in this larger consciousness system that cares for you. And I don't know if it has a predestined plan, but we can absolutely participate in this dance of cosmic evolving, unfolding, and creativity. True creativity that takes hydrogen and oxygen, and instead of making hydro-oxygen, it makes water. Something unimagined before. And that can happen in your own life over and over again. I'm 58 years old and I'm just getting the hang of this thing. And I expect the next 20 or 30 years of my life to be the most exciting and fulfilling as I lean more and more into my soul leading and my personality following the choices and experiences of my life. So take some time to care for your soul, to listen to your own deeper wisdom. Take 5 minutes with a journal or to sit in nature. Come into your body, feel into your heart, into your belly, into your gut. The soul lives in the body, but it has its own language. And learning that language and participating in our individual conversation with our own soul and our soul conversation with the larger spiritual or consciousness system, that's the path to joy and fulfillment that most of us are really seeking. Thank you so much for listening. And deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon. Your continued support is so valuable and appreciated. And I've taken a little break, but I'm returning to my weekly lives on Insight Timer, fabulous app with all kinds of wonderful teachers and free meditations, workshops, and classes. I'm going to return to my weekly healing trauma live events on Wednesdays. At this point, I'm going to do 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, 8 p.m. GMT. I'm gathering students for my next cycle of my mentorship program in spiritual psychology. If you want to evolve and expand and ground the unique gifts that your soul personality self has to offer to the larger system. It's a really powerful year-long program in how to be a healthy healer, how to ground in spirit in really practical ways and offer what you bring from a place of empowerment, connection, and consciousness. And they have a lot of free webinars planned for this fall, and I'll keep you posted on those upcoming events. And I'm going to be starting a live 10-day trauma healing boot camp. We'll do 10 to 15 minutes each day for 10 days, live and free. I'm looking for a few more people to fill those spots, and then we'll work out dates and times. So if you're interested in any of that, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. And if you like this podcast, consider dropping 5 stars in Spotify or a good review on iTunes. And if you'd like some individual help in caring for your own soul, that is the basis of my spiritual psychology work. You can reach out and we'll set up a free 30-minute discovery call to support and nourish your own soul journey. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.